Hello, everybody, and welcome to our World Today, the Unionist Perspective. This is part 3 of our evolved conversation, and we will be looking at some topics that we believe are relevant and worth exploration. And we invite all of you to share your thoughts and your feelings and any insights you might have into our topics today in the comments. We'd also like to invite you to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you will find all our previous conversations and also our Sunday services and our after church tea times. So welcome to the team. Welcome to everybody for joining us. Welcome to everybody and thank you for joining us. So I'd like to open it up to the team. There were some interesting topics that surfaced in this week, and I think primarily our theme is looking at social and political inclusion. And so I'd like to touch base with the team and see what topic is top of mind to start off with.
I'm feeling we either start with Ilhan Omar, or Ilhan Omar, is that how you pronounce it? Or Erdogan's story with and relationship with Sweden. So,
what do you guys feel? Do you feel like going to Sweden, or do you feel like going to Washington, D.C.?
traveling.
I'm voting for Sweden, and primarily because it seems like a very almost religious slur in what has taken place, which is informing the politics. So I definitely believe that there's something very interesting to explore in that Swedish topic in terms of the fact that because of right-wing protesters burning a Quran in Sweden, it's threatening their entrance into NATO. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's standing out to me quite a bit.
I was going into Sweden too, but mostly I'm confused about Erdogan in general and his behavior, and I understand like the outrage, because obviously like this is like something that is, the Quran is a sacred text, and I think like people have had enough about it, but like it touched the Turkish community in a very special way in Sweden, and I understand that Erdogan would respond to it, but like I don't know how it is about NATO, how he made it about NATO, or how he made it about his text. He said my text, as long as you burn my text. It feels like wanting to have a sympathy of people. And also I'm wondering if it isn't like ironically a parallel with how we can't enter the European Union because it doesn't recognize like Turkey's involvement in certain wars and genocides and problematic geopolitical situations. So I'm not confused about it, but I feel like there's a lot there. And it's not just pure intentions, as I was saying when we were discussing this for the first time in the chat. So I feel like we should probably unpack it in terms of like feelings, or like how you guys like, do you have a different vision about how it plays out, or yeah.
One thing I feel about it is that I think the thing is that it's kind of just a case of like two countries having they have like a beef, like they have beef with each other, they're quarreling, and they just kind of like are, I think Erdogan is doing this because it does feel a lot like it comes from a place of like wanting the people's approval and wanting to shore up his regime. I agree with that. And the thing is that Erdogan, like, in order for Sweden to join NATO, one of the conditions that he was saying was that they would have to extradite like a whole list of people who, like, so Sweden has people who have fled as refugees from Turkey because they were like facing persecution, like journalists, for example, who were like, critical of Erdogan's regime. So, and Erdogan was saying, well, you need to extradite those people to us. And then I think it was about a month ago, the Swedish Supreme Court decided this, and Sweden is saying like, our judiciary is independent. Like, there's nothing we can do about this. It's just what the judiciary decided, which is technically not really true, I feel, because the country's consciousness comes through everything and what people are choosing. But basically what they were saying is like, no, because based on international law, we can't do that. We can't extradite someone who fled your country because they were being persecuted. Like, we can't do that. And so there's been that tension, and with Turkey and Sweden, and then that happens, and I don't know, and it makes me wonder, well, I don't know, what do you guys feel about it? I'm kind of out of words for that one.
I'm laughing because both of you are echoing a sense of confusion related to the topic, which kind of comes through very strongly in what has happened. So, for the fact that there was a joint NATO application between Sweden and Finland, and in response to Putin's war on Ukraine. 2, because of right-wing protests in a country, it now questions the support for one of those countries. The person who is literally reneging on the support has also made some, for lack of a better phrasing, ludicrous demands when you consider that under asylum conditions, the last thing you do is extradite the people that are asking for asylum. You also, unless they're terrorists, which is a whole different ball game, right? Unless they are significant human rights abuses or anything like that, it's highly unlikely that any country around the world that offers asylum to asylum seekers would then renege on the provision of that asylum in support of a political maneuver it's technically a political maneuver for in the desire to be joining NATO. So there's a lot of things at play, and it kind of muddies the water. And so in that muddying, we can see how the lack of clarity behind what we would generally have a sense of the intention of is coming through very strongly. So it is interesting that we ourselves, as we delve into this topic, we are feeling that almost that consciousness of confusion in this topic. And that to me, again, it just speaks to the collective connectedness that we can actually feel that consciousness of confusion, which is probably clouding our ability to shine the unionist lens on this topic quite comfortably. So I think it might be a good place for us to just make the choice to let go of confusion and to remember our purpose, which is to look at the world through a unionist lens and to bring the unionist perspective to what is obviously not very clear. And to say that in that unionist perspective, confusion generally speaks of a deeper upset. It speaks of a resistance to looking at the truth of an upset. And so the confusion in this is we don't know the truth behind their intentions, which is what's muddying the waters. And so there's a lot of little components, and I feel like we just need to allow the components to potentially be compartmentalized a little bit and handle them individually as opposed to all together. Because I think if we handle them individually, the truth will reveal itself, or a sense of the truth will reveal itself. So I just wanted to put that out there to say, let's remember why we are here, and remember that our purpose is, if we can't find the truth in their actions, we have to feel into the truth behind their intent.
Mm-hmm. And so as we speak, it's becoming clearer, because like what I would say as the next step would be that what I feel is that Erdogan, and the article talked about it as well, he's playing on a lot of social moves and political moves that don't have anything to do with an international organization about international defense. That is not exactly into the geopolitical relationship between countries. And that is probably what is feeling murky as well. And I feel what it does there, his advantage, is probably to refuse to acknowledge how his own regime is, the feeling that was there is that is refusing to acknowledge how his own regime is not being compassionate. It's something that reminds me of questions that Jeff asked us a few months ago about like how people that are in, for example, dictatorship, because like is forbidden a lot of things, especially like freedom of expression. So feels like is coming into that part of a side of the world that is in dictatorships, like how they feel that for them, what they do is pursuing and maintaining peace. And so it feels like for him, the way is always going about his regime and everything that it does feels like he feels so righteous in his choices and how he feels like it's for the best for his country and for him. And I feel like he's almost gaslighting us in that sense, because the way he goes about it is like, oh, this is completely normal. And then you take a step back and you're like, wait a minute, this is not normal. And actually, why were these journalists seeking asylum in the first place? Like, and when you start to like pick up at the pieces, you start to realize that there is something wrong there. And I think that's why the heart of this story with Sweden is not actually the burning of the Quran, as he would say. And basically, I think that's what most people picked up on, because the articles are not about that. It's about how he is like the centerpiece of a relationship that's confusing, because he's like literally sending gas into our faces, and how we are not seeing completely his game, or maybe he wants to make us feel that what he's doing is normal when it's actually not. And yeah. So
something that kind of popped out to me as you were speaking was, it feels a bit like he's playing quite a narcissistic game of abuse with his country and with the world. So deflecting from the core issues. Because if we read into what the protest was in Sweden, it literally speaks to the topics that you have raised in terms of the abuse of human rights, the persecution of people that generally speak up, that kind of thing. So it kind of, it doesn't feel as much like gaslighting as it feels more like a game of narcissistic abuse. So deflect from my abusive behavior by pointing out somebody else's abusive behavior, or by characterizing somebody else's behavior as abusive, who's calling me out on my abusive behavior. So it's very much a game of shadows, and that is why there's no real clarity on the surface of it. And unfortunately, the surface is generally where we see it first. And so when it's that murky, we might be tempted to avoid it, to look elsewhere for a less murky topic. And so it's, I just feel like this is like testament to how we have healed as a team and as unionists, that we are going to go and look in the uncomfortable place. We want to know what that upset is, not this upset of the mosquitoes flying on top of the water. We want to understand if there's lava under that layer of murkiness. So I feel like there's a significant shift when we bring our collective healed energy into exploring a topic that other people might not look at it as in-depthly as what we would, but because we're trying to uncover what's actually the truth here, and what game is being played, and what consciousness is here, and what level of consciousness or unconsciousness is here. And so I feel like there's a lot of deflection in how he's handling the world at the moment. And it might not be the consciousness of a nation, but he may be inadvertently in certain instances, and quite advertently in other instances, be trying to influence the consciousness of a nation that is probably saying, hey, buddy, clean up your act.
Yeah, that's what I was getting from it too, is that he feels it's actually it seems powerful maybe at first glance, or depending on how you look at it, but I feel like it just shows it betrays a sense of like powerlessness that he's feeling, because it seems like a little, it's very like demagogic, like it's very just like rile up an angry mob and get them to support you and have warm feelings toward you. And he wouldn't need to do that if he didn't feel like he was in like kind of a vulnerable position. And, you know, especially with the whole like journalist extradition thing, like he's saying like, you know, I want to bring these like dissenters to justice, but my feeling is that maybe that move wasn't popular enough, like with people, like when he said that. And this was more popular because it's easy. It's like this, like he's just, you know, taking advantage of this like really raw nerve of probably feeling like discriminated against, you know, that people have, like, you know, in the Islamic community and stuff like that. And so he's just taking advantage of that opportunistically. It's just, I don't think it's not even about, it's just about, I feel like it's just a political calculus. Like he's like, yeah, let's do this. And it has nothing to do with Sweden and NATO and all of this, you know, nothing to do with anything, literally. So
yeah, I have to agree with you. Because the one of the conditions for a country joining NATO, as we read in the article, was that there has to be a unanimous agreement for them to join. So he's kind of trying to wield his small stick in a big way.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, you're right on the money with that. And I think we're seeing a pattern. Literally, as you guys were talking, I was like, it's exactly like Putin. Like he will wield anything on any occasions to rally people to his cause. I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to try to forecast anything, but I'm pretty sure if he could wield the tragic earthquake that just happened in Turkey in his favor to rally people from the Turkish and international community, he would. And he's doing exactly what we've seen so many others doing. It might seem like it's compassionate on the surface, and it's much more subtle maybe within, because I feel like the international community has more, I guess, still has a well of patience for him, contrary to other leaders. But I think it's pretty much the same. And the way Sage explained it, it was like a copycat. It would seem like a copycat. It was exactly the same strategy that we've discussed from certain people applied to his situation. So yeah, not trying to forecast how he would try to manipulate tragic events to his advantage, but I would say that if he could, he would, because that's what we've seen in the past 10 years of him doing. And I feel like yeah, it's probably like his people have not yet said like we have had enough of this, because it's trying to maintain a status quo. But yeah, we'll see. I'll see what it does with that.
So one thing I do want to mention is, like you said, you're not trying to forecast his intention or his action, but I feel like we also need to remember that we have the power to recognize patterns. And so recognizing a pattern doesn't necessarily mean forecasting
Oh,
delinquent behavior. We are pointing out how the dots connect and how they stack up. And, you know, no matter whether a leopard gets slung with mud, when the mud washes off, the spots remain the same.
I know. Yeah, but it's still like, if we're trying to maybe talk to our consciousness, in geopolitics, you don't forecast because you don't know what the future will bring. Like, for example, something could happen tomorrow that shifts the reality in a completely different way and was not at all what we were expecting. So you need to be very like prudent with the forecasting. And at the same time, like I'm recognizing that there's a pattern there and that if he could, he would, is what I would say. Yeah. So yeah, does that feel complete in the space? Should we move on? Pakistan or Washington, D.C.? Next. How do you guys feel?
Let's go to Washington.
Okay.
Washington.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it was also quite interesting. In this topic was also quite interesting, and there's also just a little bit of my sense of somebody having had a narrative or rhetoric, and then kind of achieving a certain position and starting to disavow her previous behavior. And so that's one of the things in the background. But then, you know, her being ousted from a foreign policy committee, if I remember correctly, it was foreign policy committee or something like that. But yeah, it's just interesting that she's a non-white, so black Muslim woman, and there's a lot of controversy related to the Muslim state around the world at the moment. And so, you know, partially the sense of, is her voice being silenced or not? And if her voice is being silenced, it says, well, how much freedom is there really in the land of the free?
Yeah, I felt like one thing about it too that you have to like take into account is that like the some of the people, you know, some of the Republican Party members who are criticizing her, like they were saying that she was like anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. Those are two things that I'm not sure that she actually is. Like, I don't think that she's actually opposed to the existence of Israel as a state. And definitely, I wouldn't go so far as to say she was anti-Semitic. I feel like she is just being a voice for a lot of people who feel like Palestinians are in an abusive relationship with the Israeli state and everything. And she's just giving voice to that, you know, and she herself, you know, believes it and views it that way. And she feels like Israel has an apartheid state set up, you know, and yeah, I don't know. What did you mean when you said that she was like backing out of her positions? Did Ilhan Omar was?
Yeah, so not immediately, but not right now, but in the past, where she was probably making quite a few anti-Israel statements. When she was actually put in this committee, she disavowed some of those statements. So like, there's also this feeling of, is she playing the long game? And has somebody seen through her long game?
What do you mean by like playing the long game?
Well,
Sorry, I'm not.
It's very easy to turn around and say, oh, I didn't really mean what I said back then in order to secure your position now.
Oh, okay. So to like try to, do that. Yeah, I know. And I feel that because, to be honest, this is an issue that, like, I know from experience in the US and being in those environments where, like, like in college, I was introduced to the feelings around this topic there's like intense ferocity on both sides. And there's an intense, like, bitter grudge on both sides, obviously, and both, anyone, like either party would have to heal it to resolve it, like let the grudge go. But yeah, no, I'm serious. And that's the thing. That's why like this topic gets really murky and muddy and kind of rough, because people are expressing sentiments sometimes where they're basically saying, like, we don't like Israel, like we are against whatever. And it does come off as like anti-Semitic sometimes. It does, because there's so much vitriol behind it. And I actually get what people are saying about that. And it's a very sensitive issue for both sides in this. And I totally get it. But I don't know. I don't know fully about like the whole picture of it and how they're dealing with it. I think that one thing that I do feel for certain on is that there needs to be more like emotional presence in the dialogue, and there needs to be like healing there and letting go of the grudges and really looking at it in like a very like rational, understanding way, for both sides. Because the notion of this was that there's one narrative. There's like this drastically different narrative between like there's the Israeli narrative and the Palestinian narrative, and they just don't, agree.
So,
Yeah.
for a long time, I agreed with you, and I think a part of me still agrees with you on that. But I also feel like we're seeing the same thing and the same deflecting that we talked about in the previous story. And the fact is that it's like any racial discussions that are there right now and currently happening in the world is people are saying, and maybe that's why there's so much sentiment about it. People are tired of saying, have been tired of saying for 200 years, like, okay, the problem is Israel is that there is a separation and there is an abuse of Palestinian people. And also we anti-Israel because of this abuse and apartheid, and because the country was literally built on separation and, in a way, annihilation of Palestinian people. And obviously there's also a religious for sentiment around it for many people, because like there's Islam on one side, and a lot of Christian people feel like Israel is like the promised land, and that's where we originate from, and that's where we will go back in heaven. But it's also a thing like if we remove the religious text, like there is unwillingness to look at the core of how it all started. And it's easy to blame Islam and a lot of Muslim people and Palestinian for how much vitriol they have for this. And I understand. I think nobody really wants Israel to go away. We don't want to annihilate a country. But the problem is that on the other side, there is literally a government that is supported by many people that is annihilating another country and another nation. And I feel like the debate has never been equal, and that's the problem. That's really the problem. And after we can look at the little surface things like we were saying and say like maybe Ilhan Omar, she not disavowed what she was saying before, but I think like being in the House of Representatives is playing a lot of like compromising with people. She's playing the political game for me. But yeah, that's all surface. Her accusation, her being out of the committee, that's all surface. And that there is this unwillingness, like maybe even deeper than the other topic, to look at this core thing that has been sitting there rotting for 200 years and that is only getting worse and worse and worse until we make a new choice. And that is just like antagonizing people between each other because the leadership and the consciousness as a whole is unwilling to see that there needs to be a discussion there. And along the discussion, because I agree that there's both parties needs to calm down, there is also an unwillingness from the primary abuser, the one that is making the most damage, to recognize its part in this. Because for them, they're innocent, and for them, they're victims, even though they're still like imprisoning and killing people, using nukes on them, things like that. Yeah.
So I have a feeling that you touched on the core issue in terms of the topic, which was literally the core of racial pain and the core of racial abuse and the core of separation. And I feel like, one of the very, very basic and probably foundational pieces is the sense of divide and conquer. So, and it stems, kind of, for me, it speaks to the fact that people still don't recognize their own power, but the oppressor or the abuser does. And what happens is, once that oppressor or abuser starts to perceive power in the oppressed or abused or subordinated or subjugated or whatever you want to call it, once they start to recognize the power that could surge through that specific person or party or entity, you find that the behavior of abuse is ramped up because of the fear that I will be supplanted. I will lose my power base. And I feel like that is something that's happening a lot, is that there's this extremism in the sense of exercising power because it's far easier to keep people subjugated when they just completely buy into their powerlessness, as opposed to allowing them to start to realize their level of power. So there's a bigger game at play, but it's very much at a deeper level. And one of that deeper level is you almost keep somebody prisoner when you don't acknowledge the impact of your behavior on them. You keep them a prisoner. The minute you start to acknowledge, actually, my behavior could have had these consequences or may have had these consequences, that supposed power or perceived power starts to diminish, or even just the perception of it starts to diminish, which is to erode ill-gotten power.
Yeah.
Problem is probably it won't diminish right away, because a lot of Israeli people are thinking that and are still in this consciousness. But there's this narrative that Palestinians and Muslims at large just want the Israel country to disappear. And I think that I really had to sit with that for years and years and say, is this true? And is the fight actually equal? And are their concerns actually real? And for me, it's starting to feel exactly the same as the people that are trying to wield the narrative that Taiwan is trying to take over the whole of China. I think it's ludicrous, and I think it's just more deflecting. And I think a lot of people have had enough of that. But because the consciousness of Israeli people on this matter is still so strong, like we're facing a lot of ego, and that's what Ilhan Omar is facing too. So it's just it's not personal, I feel. Not really, not on this topic, but it's just a lot of upheaval and also reaction from the ego, very strong reaction from the ego. And it's sad that she's bearing the brunt of it, as a lot of women of color in the House of Representatives actually are at this time. But yeah, it's just like the playing of patterns.
Yeah. I think the only way through it is for somebody to like stand in peace with it, like to be speaking about the topic and being present with the topic in a really peaceful way, because otherwise it escalates really quickly. And like you guys say, you only get to hear about surface level stuff. You don't go to the core of the issue. Yeah. And that's true too, because like whenever I've heard about the topic, very few times have I ever heard people talk about the core of the issue and how the real thing, you know. But yeah, but we can.
Something else that's quite interesting was the White House spokesperson saying that that Republican decision was very ill-conceived, which is also telling, you know. And so I believe that there is definitely a shift in consciousness. I believe that it needs to take place more often, and it's probably going to require a lot of it to happen. So it can't be isolated instances. It's kind of literally every single time something happens, a counter opinion needs to be raised to say, are you actually paying attention? Because all you ever really need to do is ask people if they're paying attention. Are you looking at what's really happening here? And I feel like when the White House stands up and says, well, actually, what were you guys thinking? And I know the White House is mostly it's a democratically it's a democratic party run space at the moment, right? So you've got this bipartisan kind of political system, and yes, they're standing up and saying, we kind of support this person's stance on things. What were you people thinking? And I think that's really the important thing, is no longer to point fingers and say you were wrong, as opposed to going, are you thinking it through completely? Have you considered all angles to this conversation or this topic? And asking the question might just serve the purpose of getting people to think about it without feeling compelled to defend themselves. Because the minute you attack somebody's position, it's very likely, and it's like the immediate response would be to stand up in defense of your position. But asking a question in a way that is non-threatening says a whole, it just creates a new space for dialogue. And even if it's not verbal dialogue, there's definitely a level of dialogue happening.
Yeah, it's true. So what the White House supports Israel in terms of security and defense at the moment. But I feel like the spokesperson, it's like any human beings, like whatever choices you make, there's still a part of you that is going to recognize what is the truth and what is divine or not. And I think that's what the spokesperson was actually speaking to. The thing is, the counter voice to the status quo and deflecting and going deeper, in my opinion, resides in the women of the House of Representatives at the moment. And it was so sensitive that they only I'm going to say the debate only escalated on the feelings present. Like I saw AOC's intervention on this, and she said this is an attack on women of color, which it is, which it is. But I think she played it maybe on the side of a thing that she knew she could win because she had the arguments for it, because she only had 1 minute to express herself. But it's still a surface level thing. So the moment the people in the House of Representatives, all those people that we were like, oh my gosh, they were elected. This is change. This is good. Like the House is changing. As soon as they will, I think, take complete ownership of their divine purpose there, which is to really speak from a place of peace. And I don't know if they're there yet. Maybe they won't be in this lifetime, but they're learning from their mistakes too. I feel like real change is going to happen. And I think we need to be in the name of taking a step back. I think we need to be patient there, because I think the best thing to learn is by doing, and that's what they're doing, and they're not perfect, and there's still so much in American politics that is taking place there. But maybe in the future they will be better at just doing their divine purpose. Like none of us is perfect at doing our divine purpose yet. Otherwise, we would probably be in heaven or amongst the wealthiest on the earth right now, and we're still learning. So yeah, I think the more we recognize ownership of a truth there, who's going to be the spokesperson of this discussion, this debate, this bipartisanship, and the more they're going to take power there themselves, the more smoothly we're going to progress without having feelings involved. Yeah. Yep. Okay. What's next? Any feelings on this? Or are we going to talk about one last thing?
So I definitely think our next thing is Trump and his shenanigans around
Oh yeah.
transgender people. It's just like, and I mean, the tweet was it was a small tweet, but I mean, it just carries so much vile and venom in it, and you kind of have to just wonder. I'm gonna just say it: how fucked up one person can actually be.
It's just, it's just saying that he's someone who is being really willing to participate in illusion and participate in self debasement and debasement of others in order to access power. It's that simple. I mean, he's never been, I don't think he's ever really been that principled about it. I don't think it's a religious crusade for this guy. He used to be a registered Democrat, and everything. And, he was going to run as an independent before. It's opportunistic because this is a time when, kind of like you guys were saying earlier, when someone who is like facing abuse, such as the transgender community, starts to gain a sense of their power, which we are, those who are perpetrating abuse start to want to abuse more to try to convince them to stop, claiming their power and rising up and being seen. And it's undeniable that there's just been so much progress there, like trans people being seen and just, standing up for themselves and advocating for themselves and everything. But you see that there's this big like reactionary movement against it. And yeah, it's just happening mainly in like states that are Republican controlled or areas that might be Republican controlled localities. But Trump is appealing to like, let's try to make this a whole nationwide thing. And it's like the next scale up. And I think that also he's trying to, it's kind of like a competition among people who are running and for the Republican ticket to see like how much they can appeal to that, like to that deep sentiment against transgender people. And that's what it is, and I feel like it feels really empowering to kind of like call it out like as that for me, because it shows that it's just serving weakness. It's just serving somebody trying to clutch at power. And that's it. That's what I feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just so far off the deep end, and he knows he knows that he's losing power. Like he knows that America is not on his side. Like everyone can see that he's insane, and there's agreement there now that like he's a very far away choice for America at the point, thank God. So yeah, exactly what you said, Sage. Like he's just really just trying to cling and clutch to the extreme of like getting those people who are on his side more on his side, like just yeah, you guys know what I'm saying. Yeah,
I agree. And
yeah,
hopefully, like the whole of consciousness, no, not hopefully, it's clear that the whole of consciousness is definitely not on his side, and it feels so good. And it's not about a Scandinavian country having an easier way to change your name now in their text laws. It's also in the US, because this weekend there was the first transgender woman winning a Grammy in a very big category, Kim Petras. Just like, obviously, usually I wouldn't take entertainment and pop culture as the showing of the whole consciousness, But there is something so powerful about it that it felt like, yeah, we're making a different choice. And it was just right after I saw the video on Donald Trump, and I was like, this is peanuts what it's doing. Right now, what is happening on the scene, on stage, is so much more important. It feels so good, and I'm so glad that we're having a conversation with Donald Trump where it's not just about him and his craziness, it's also actually about the goodness and the good choices of consciousness and the evolution right now, the progress that we're seeing. I think it feels so good.
So Eugene, Eugene, there's something that, there's something a little bit odd happening here, because that energy of confusion is playing out in the States as well, specifically related to transgender people. And I say that because you have Trump blowing a horn in one direction, you have a win of a transgender person that's very visible and very public. But then you also have the governor of Utah signing a bill that bans gender-affirming healthcare for youth, or transgender healthcare youth, for transgender youth. So, like I'm saying, again, that confusion in consciousness, or that inner battle that plays out generally at an individual level, seems to be also kind of playing out a lot in a collective consciousness way, and that's why you're seeing almost this toggling energy between these two things. And one of the things that I want to echo that Sage was sharing was also, you get tested hardest just before a breakthrough. So we're also not sure what breakthrough is coming for transgender people in consciousness.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's cool to see. And I wanted to, Nadia made a comment to Nadia from our group, but she couldn't be here today. She is not feeling well. But she did say, do you think there's an economic benefit or lobbyist reasoning to alienate the transgender population? Like, is there like an economic interest behind alienating the transgender population? I would say from my experience and from my observations, not really, because I feel like if you're thinking about it as lobbyists, like big corporations that would fund politicians, some of them have a conservative agenda, but some of them have a liberal agenda. And sometimes, I don't know, I don't know if there's, I think it's mainly just a power benefit because they're trying to appeal to people's feelings of like negative feelings toward trans people. What do you guys feel?
So I definitely think it's a very divisive play. Yeah. So it's about divide and conquer. So appealing to random sentiments keeps your power base as opposed to ensuring that people come together. I do think that it's a topic to be further explored because we have reached our hour though. So thank you to everybody for the conversation. We will see all of you soon. We'd like to invite all the people that have watched and are watching to please like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you will find all our previous conversations. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.